The police lights flashed outside my house, red and blue beams cutting through the dim stillness of dawn in Pinewood Estates, California. I stood at the threshold, hands still gripping the doorknob, a weary heaviness pressing down on every bone in my body. I rubbed my eyes, my mind spinning as it tried to process the surreal scene unfolding before me. The cheerful chirping of birds was now drowned out by the sharp blare of the police siren, a brief sound but enough to make my heart pound. Linda Harper, the self-proclaimed overseer of this neighborhood, stood smugly on the sidewalk right in front of my lawn, arms crossed over her chest like a suburban queen asserting her dominance. She was talking to two police officers, her tone a mix of feigned innocence and indignation, insisting that I refuse to clear my lawn, a space I'd spent months tending to, so she could park a big van for her birthday party tonight. Picture this: Linda, the same woman who once secretly tapped into my sprinkler system to water her garden until I turned the water back on her system, completely legally, of course. Now here she was, standing there smug as if I were the biggest problem Pinewood Estates had ever faced. I stood at the door, my hands still gripping the doorknob tightly, watching her ramble on to the police. "He's blocking my lawn," Linda said, her shrill voice ringing out in the cool morning air. "My guests need a place to park the van, and he refuses to budge even an inch," I asked nicely. "But he doesn't care." I nearly laughed at the way she called that nicely. Just minutes ago, she'd pounded on my door like she wanted to break it down, yelling that I had to clear the lawn immediately, so her van could have a spot. The police stood between us, trying to keep their faces neutral as they listened to Linda's spiel. A young officer, who I guessed was new on the job, looked at me with a mix of curiosity and confusion. The other, older and more seasoned, seemed like he just wanted to wrap this up and get coffee. Linda kept up her act, turning to them with a triumphant expression. "I've lived here for 20 years, she said, her tone implying that made her the owner of the whole neighborhood. "I've never had trouble with anyone until he moved in. He's making things hard for my guests. They deserve to park somewhere decent." I shook my head, a mix of disbelief and irritation rising within me. "Hold on," I said, my voice hoarse from being dragged out of sleep. "This lawn is mine, my private property. I'm not blocking anything. There's a ton of parking space on the street right there. Why doesn't she tell her guests to use it?" But Linda didn't even bother listening. She turned back to the police, continuing to yell as if I'd just committed an international crime. "See, he won't cooperate. This is a community safety issue." I stood there, hands still on the doorknob, trying to figure out how things had gotten so out of hand. Just a few hours earlier, I'd been in bed, drifting through a peaceful day of blueprints and morning coffee in my mind. Now I was facing flashing police lights, Linda Harper screaming, and two officers looking at me like I was the troublemaker. Linda didn't care about the truth. For her, this was about control, about forcing me to bow to her ridiculous demands. And as I watched her standing there, smug and unapologetic, I knew this was only the beginning. She turned to the two officers, her arms crossing tighter, her tone now a blend of sweetness and menace. "I just want everything to go smoothly for the party," she said, her eyes flicking toward me like I was a criminal fresh out of jail. "But he refuses to clear the lawn, and now where are my guests supposed to park the van?" I've tried my best to be nice. I nearly choked on the word nice. Nice. Linda had banged on my door at the crack of dawn, ordering me to destroy my lawn like I was her servant. But before I could respond, the young officer, I heard Linda call him Officer Ryan, stepped forward, his voice trying to stay calm but his eyes showing clear unease. "Sir, it's a simple request," he said, looking at me with tired eyes. "If you could just clear the lawn so her van can park, we wouldn't have to escalate this." I blinked, unable to believe my ears. "Escalate?" I repeated, my voice now tinged with sarcasm I couldn't hide. "What do you mean? Are we at war over a lawn? Is this an international parking space conflict?" I wasn't trying to be funny, but the absurdity of the situation made it impossible to hold back. Linda stood there, lips pursed tight, clearly not liking how I was turning her demand into a joke. But I didn't care. I was tired, annoyed, and above all baffled that things had gone this far. Linda didn't even glance at me anymore. She turned to Officer Ryan, continuing her performance. "See, he won't cooperate," she said, her tone now rising like a bad stage actor. "I just want my guests to have a decent parking spot, but he's deliberately sabotaging it. I've been here 20 years, and no one's ever dared to make trouble for me like this." She practically glowed with smugness, as if dragging the police out at dawn was her greatest moral victory. I shook my head, anger slowly overtaking my disbelief. But then a memory hit me, making me pause. Linda Harper wasn't new to this power game. A few months ago, right after I moved to Pinewood Estates, she'd secretly used water from my sprinkler system to irrigate her garden, a lush plot she proudly showed off to the whole neighborhood. I found out when my water bill spiked, and after some checking, I discovered an illegal pipe connecting my system to hers. I'd fought back, not with lawsuits, but by turning the water back through her system, leaving a foul stench in her garden for a whole week. Of course, I did it completely legally, just a minor maintenance fix to show her no one could trespass on my property without consequences. And that was just the start. Now standing at the door watching Linda yell at the police, I realized this wasn't just about the van or the lawn, it was about control. Linda had a knack for turning trivial matters into full-blown disasters, and I was her latest target in this self-appointed crusade. Officer Ryan looked at me, obviously uncomfortable with the situation, but he repeated, "Sir, if you'd just clear the lawn, we'd be out of your hair." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "No," I said, my voice firmer than I'd expected. "This is my lawn, and I'm not clearing it just because she wants to throw a party. There's plenty of space on the street for her van." Linda spun around, eyes blazing, but I didn't let her interrupt. "She called the police over this, unbelievable." I glanced at the older officer, Officer Brooks, I assumed, and saw him smirk slightly, as if he too thought this was ridiculous. But Linda didn't stop, she kept yelling, and I stood there, trying to wrap my head around how things had spiraled so far over a patch of grass. The police lights kept flashing outside, red and blue sweeping across my lawn like a reminder that this mess wasn't over. I stood at the threshold, hands still gripping the doorknob, my breathing steadier now, but still tinged with frustration. Linda Harper didn't slow down. She turned to Officer Ryan and Officer Brooks, her tone now sickeningly sweet, like she was playing the victim in a cheap movie. "See, I've tried my hardest," she said, her arms flailing dramatically. "I've lived in Pinewood Estates for 20 years, and I've never had trouble with anyone until he showed up." I shook my head, feeling like every word from her was a stab at my patience. Linda practically glowed with smugness, as if dragging the police here at dawn was some grand moral triumph. She didn't even look at me, just kept yelling at the cops, her voice shifting to fake pity. "He's making it hard for my guests," she said, blinking like she might cry. "They deserve a decent place to park the van. I'm just trying to throw a party for the whole neighborhood, and he's deliberately ruining it." I stood there, stunned by how she twisted the story. Ruining it? I just refused to clear my own lawn, a lawn I'd hand-trimmed and watered with my own sweat, turning it into a little point of pride in Pinewood Estates. But Linda didn't care about facts. To her, this was a show, and she was starring as the wronged queen. Officer Ryan glanced at me, his tired eyes showing unease, but he stayed quiet. Officer Brooks, the older cop, coughed lightly, like he wanted to cut her off, but she didn't give him a chance. "This isn't just about the lawn," Linda went on, her voice now shrill and furious. "It's about respect. I've been here longer than him, and I know what this neighborhood needs. He has no right to ruin my plans." She turned to me for the first time since the police arrived, eyes blazing. "Who do you think you are to do this to me?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but her absurdity pushed me past silence. "I think I'm the homeowner," I said, my voice colder than I'd expected. "This is my lawn, my private property. I'm not ruining anything, I just won't let you boss me around. There's a wide street right there for your van." But Linda didn't listen. She turned back to the police, continuing her act, as if I'd just confessed to a crime. Officer Brooks finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "Miss Harper, please calm down," he said, glancing at me briefly. I caught a flicker of doubt in his eyes, not for me, but for Linda. Still, she didn't stop. She waved her arms, pointing at my lawn, like it was proof of some heinous act. He needs to clear it right now, she yelled. My guests are coming tonight, and I can't let them see this neighborhood in chaos like this. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the lawn, or the van. It was about power. Linda wanted to control me, to control all of Pinewood Estates like she used to. The sprinkler incident flashed back, how she'd tapped my water, how I'd turned it back on her to teach her a lesson, and now, I decided it was time to push back again. I let go of the doorknob, stepped outside, and stared straight at Linda. Fine, I said, my voice calm but sharp. You want to play this game, I'll show you how I play. I turned back inside, grabbed my phone from the kitchen table, and remotely activated the sprinkler system. A hiss sounded and water sprayed from the nozzles across the lawn, hitting Linda and the ground around her. She screamed, jumping back, her high heels slipping on the wet grass. What are you doing? She shrieked, her wet hair sticking to her face. Officer Ryan flinched, while Brooks smirked, like he was holding back a laugh. This is my property, I said, my voice now laced with humor. I can turn on the sprinklers whenever I want. If you don't like it, tell your guests to park on the street. Linda stood there, drenched and furious, but I didn't care. I'd just started, and she had no idea I was ready to take this game to a whole new level. Water still sprayed from the sprinkler system, glinting like sparks under the dawn light growing brighter in Pinewood Estates. I stood at the threshold, phone in hand, watching Linda Harper leap back on my wet lawn, her high heels sliding slightly on the ground. What are you doing? She shrieked, her shrill voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood, her blonde hair plastered wet against her face. Officer Ryan stepped aside to dodge the spray, startled, while Officer Brooks quirked his lips, his eyes gleaming with clear amusement at the scene. This is my property, I said, my voice calm but sharp, tinged with humor I couldn't hide. I've got every right to turn on my sprinklers whenever I want. If you don't like it, you can tell your guests to park the van on the street. Linda stood there, soaked and furious, her arms flailing like she wanted to tear the air apart, but I didn't care. I was done with her games, and turning on the sprinklers was just the first step to make her see I wasn't someone she could push around. Officer Brooks finally spoke up, his voice low and measured. Miss Harper, maybe you should explain this again, he said, casting a quick glance my way. If this is private property, we can't force him to clear the lawn. Linda whipped around to him, her eyes blazing. You can't let him do this to me, she yelled, her voice now so shrill, it made me wonder if the whole neighborhood was waking up. I just want to be treated fairly. My guests aren't second-class citizens who have to park on the street like that. I nearly laughed at how she blew everything out of proportion. Fairly, she'd secretly used water from my system, banged on my door at dawn, and called the police just because I wouldn't ruin my lawn. But before I could respond, another voice cut through from the side, interrupting Linda's theatrics. Linda Harper, what are you making all this noise for so early in the morning? It was Dolores Ortiz, the old lady next door, leaning out of her second-floor window with disheveled silver hair and sharp eyes. Linda froze, clearly not expecting someone else to witness this. Dolores looked down at us, hands on her hips. I heard everything, she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. You called the police just because Ethan wouldn't clear his lawn for your silly little party. Unbelievable. Officer Ryan glanced up at Dolores, then back at Linda, his eyes now showing clear doubt. Linda flailed her arms, trying to regain control. You've got no business here, Dolores, she snapped. This is between me and him. But Dolores didn't back down. She looked at me, giving a slight nod. Go inside, Ethan, she said. I've got something to tell you after this noisy bunch leaves. I blinked a bit surprised, but nodded and stepped back in, closing the door. Linda's yells still echoed through it, but I didn't care anymore. I walked to the kitchen, brewed a cup of coffee, and sat at the table, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. About 10 minutes later, the police siren faded into the distance, and I heard a gentle knock. I opened the door to find Dolores standing there, holding a stack of old papers. You okay? She asked, stepping in without waiting for an invite. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. I'm fine, but Linda's not, I said, chuckling softly. Dolores smirked, setting the papers on the table. She's never been fine, she said. I've lived here 30 years, and I know Linda Harper well. She used to be HOA president, but got booted for abusing her power, skimming funds for her garden, forcing neighbors to do what she wanted. These are the records I kept from back then. I stared at the papers, feeling like I'd just struck gold. You serious? I asked, my voice now tinged with excitement. Dolores nodded. She thinks she's the queen of Pinewood Estates, but you're not the first she's harassed. And that sprinkler stunt? I saw it all. She deserved that lesson you gave her. She chuckled, her eyes twinkling. Keep these papers. If she keeps causing trouble, you'll have something to fight back with. I picked up the stack, feeling like I'd just gained an unexpected ally. Linda might think she was untouchable, but now I had Dolores, and a pile of info to make her think twice. The game had just shifted, and I was starting to feel I wasn't alone anymore. The dawn light now shone brighter, filtering through the kitchen window and illuminating the faded papers. Dolores Ortiz, left on the table. I sat there, cradling a still warm cup of coffee, my eyes scanning the washed-out lines of text in the documents. Linda Harper's shouts at the police still echoed in my head, but they didn't irritate me anymore, they fueled me. Dolores had just handed me a treasure, Linda's past, her violations, and a chance to turn this game to my advantage. I flipped through each page, reading every detail carefully. These were HOA meeting minutes from years ago, when Linda was still president. She'd been ousted after skimming funds to build her garden, a flower-filled plot she'd flaunted to all of Pinewood Estates as a symbol of perfection. There was even a list of petty fines she'd slapped on neighbors, one for leaving a bike out too long, another forced to trim bushes just because they didn't fit the vibe. Dolores was right. Linda wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she was a control freak, and I wasn't her first target. But what caught my eye was a small note. Linda had once thrown an unpermitted party, using public property, without HOA approval. I smirked, feeling like I'd found a crack in her fortress. If she'd done it before, then tonight's birthday party, with her absurd demand for my lawn, might be breaking rules too. I set the coffee down, grabbed my laptop from the living room, and opened the Pinewood Estates HOA internal website. Time to dig deeper. I logged in with my homeowner account, scrolling to the community rules section. There it was, plain as day. All large events must be reported and approved by the HOA board. No one may use another resident's private property without written consent. I chuckled under my breath, muttering, "You're done, Linda." She didn't have my consent, and I'd bet she hadn't reported this party either. This was the first punch I could throw. I stood up, grabbed my phone and stepped outside. The lawn was still wet from the sprinkler, droplets gleaming in the early light. I snapped a few photos, my pristine lawn, the wide street a few yards away, with plenty of room for a van, and Linda's shoe prints still etched in the grass, proof she'd trespassed. I thought back to this morning's sprinkler move, a spur-of-the-moment jab to push her back, but now I saw it could kick off something bigger. If she tried to sue me over it, these pictures would show I was just defending my property. I went back inside and called the HOA office. "Good morning," I said, when a woman answered. "I just want to ask about party rules. Do you need permission first?" She cheerfully confirmed, "Yes, all big events need prior approval, otherwise it's a violation." I thanked her, hung up, and grinned. Linda wasn't just wrong to demand my lawn, she was breaking rules with this birthday bash. I sank onto the sofa, opened my laptop, and started jotting notes. I listed everything, her sneaking my sprinkler water, calling the cops at dawn, and the ridiculous lawn demand. I added the new photos and HOA rule quotes, but I knew I needed more direct evidence. I stepped to the window, peering at Linda's house. She was out in her yard, barking orders at Greg, her husband, as he pushed a white van out of the garage. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and captured her yelling, "Take it over there tonight. I don't care what he says." I saved the clip, feeling like I'd just nabbed a keycard. I sipped more coffee, smiling. Linda might think she was unbeatable with her manipulation, but I wasn't just standing there taking it anymore. Dolores had given me the foundation, and now I was building my own strategy, not for petty revenge, but to make her pay by playing by the rules. This game just got a lot more fun, and I was ready for the next move. Noon light now flooded Pinewood Estates, bathing my lawn in a vibrant gold that highlighted Linda Harper's shoe prints still etched in the wet grass. I sat on the sofa, laptop open in front of me, fingers scrolling through the video I'd just shot. Linda yelling at Greg in her yard, pointing at my lawn like it was the source of all her life's woes. The coffee cup on the table had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I was locked in on my growing list of evidence, lawn photos, HOA rule quotes, and now this video of Linda ordering Greg around. I knew she wouldn't quit after the sprinkler stunt, and I was right. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. An email from Pinewood Estates HOA. I frowned, opened it, and felt like I'd been doused with ice water. The subject read, "Complaint about neighborhood disruption," and the message was short but sharp. "Dear Mr. Ethan Miller, we've received a report that you refused to cooperate with a community event and engaged in disruptive behavior, affecting neighborhood peace. Please explain within 48 hours, or we'll consider disciplinary action." Signed by Samantha Lee, the current HOA president. I didn't need to see the complainant's name to know it was Linda. I set the phone down, shaking my head. She was fast. Just hours after getting soaked by the sprinklers and the police leaving empty-handed, Linda had gone from screaming in the yard to attacking me through the HOA. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked across at her house. She was out in her yard, phone in hand, mouth moving like she was yelling at someone, probably Greg, who was bowing his head as he maneuvered the white van out of the garage. I smirked. She didn't just want my lawn, she wanted to paint me as the villain of Pinewood Estates, a saboteur of a community event that was really just her personal birthday party. I returned to the sofa, reopening the email. Linda had obviously blown the sprinkler incident into a disruptive act, ignoring how she'd trespassed on my property first. I thought back to how she'd manipulated the cops that morning. I just want to be treated fairly, and realized this was her usual playbook. She didn't care about the truth, she wanted me to bow down, like others in Pinewood Estates probably had before. But I wasn't them, and I wasn't about to let her win that easily. I grabbed my phone, stepped outside again, and kept recording. Linda was now pointing at my lawn, shouting at Greg, "Take the van over there tonight." I caught faintly across the distance, "If he doesn't clear it, we'll park it right next to it. I don't care what he thinks." Greg nodded feebly, looking like a man who'd given up resisting long ago. I captured it all, her shrill voice, the white van, her overbearing attitude. If she planned to park it near my lawn, without permission, that'd be another violation I could use against her. I went back inside, opened Dolores's papers, and double-checked the note about Linda's past unpermitted party. If she was repeating history, I'd have more leverage. I started drafting an HOA reply, but held off sending it. I typed, "Dear Miss Lee, I didn't disrupt anything or refuse a community event. Linda Harper demanded I clear my lawn, my private property, for a van for her personal party, which I wasn't notified about or agreed to. I have photos and videos as proof." I added the HOA rule bit, "No one can use private property without consent," and saved the draft. I wanted to see what else Linda would do before I struck. That afternoon, as I checked the lawn for any damage from the morning, I heard heavy footsteps on the sidewalk. I looked up to see Linda marching over, eyes blazing, arms crossed tight. "Think you're clever, huh?" she barked, stopping at the edge between my lawn and the public sidewalk, spraying me with sprinklers, sending the cops away empty-handed. "I've reported you to the HOA, and I'll make you regret it." I straightened up, staring her down. "You reported me for defending my property," I said, voice calm but firm. "Let's see what they say when they see my evidence." Linda took a deep breath, her lips pursing tight. "This isn't over," she said, her voice dropping into a menacing tone, then spun around and stormed off. I stood there feeling like a storm was brewing. Linda had just pushed the conflict to a new level, but I was ready. I had evidence, rules, and Dolores. She might think she held the upper hand, but I'd make her see I wasn't someone to mess with. Dusk settled over Pinewood Estates, tinting the quiet street in front of my house a golden hue. I sat on the sofa, laptop open, scrolling through the video of Linda yelling at Greg about the van. The cold coffee sat on the table next to Dolores Ortiz's papers and my prepared evidence list. Lawn photos, HOA rule quotes, and now Linda's threat to park the van next to my property. The HOA complaint email still glowed on my phone, Samantha Lee's disciplinary action warning, hanging over me. Linda Harper had upped her game, but I wasn't fazed. I'd been ready for a while. My phone buzzed again, breaking my focus. A new HOA email, subject emergency meeting notice. I opened it and skimmed. Dear residents, we're holding an emergency meeting at the Pinewood Estates Community House tomorrow night to address the dispute between Mr. Ethan Miller and Miss Linda Harper regarding the recent complaint. Attendance is mandatory for both. I smirked. Linda must have pressured them into this, thinking she'd crush me in front of the board. She had no clue what I had in store. I went back to my laptop, pulling up the draft HOA reply. I tightened it. Dear Miss Lee, I didn't disrupt or refuse any community event. Linda Harper demanded I clear my lawn, my private property, for a van for her personal party, which I wasn't notified about or agreed to. I have photos, videos and documents proving she's breaking HOA rules. I attached the lawn photos, the video of Linda bossing Greg, and quotes about private property and unpermitted events. I didn't send it yet. I'd save it as my ace for the meeting. I stood, walked to the window, and peered at Linda's house. She was in her yard, gesturing at a few neighbors, probably her allies in the area. Greg was shoving the white van into the garage, looking like a lifeless puppet. I smirked, grabbed my phone, and recorded a short clip. Linda laughed loudly, her voice carrying over "He'll regret crossing me." I saved it, adding it to my evidence stash. If she planned to turn the meeting into her manipulation stage, I'd make her face the facts. Back inside, I reopened Dolores's papers. One old record detailed Linda's fine for an unpermitted party, a perfect precedent against her. I printed it, along with the HOA rules and my lawn pics, organizing everything into a neat file, photos, videos on a USB, papers, and my notes. I felt like an engineer prepping a big pitch. Every detail had to be flawless, no gaps for Linda to exploit. A knock startled me. I opened the door to Dolores, her sharp eyes sizing me up. Heard about the meeting, she said, stepping in with a sly grin. Linda must have hounded Samantha all day to push this through. I nodded, offering her a seat. She thinks she's got this in the bag, I said, setting the file on the table. But I'm ready. Dolores glanced at the stack and laughed. You've done great, she said. Linda won't see this coming. She's used to bullying with words, but you've got proof. She's toast. I sipped the cold coffee, confidence surging. Think Samantha will listen to me? I asked. Dolores shrugged. She's fair, but she hates clashing with Linda. Show your evidence and she'll have no choice. She stood, patted my shoulder. Good luck, Ethan. I'll be there to watch Linda crash and burn. She left, leaving me with the file and a buzzing excitement. I sat back down, double-checking everything. The lawn pics showed no obstruction, Linda's yelling videos proved her harassment, and Dolores's records with the HOA rules were the knockout blow. Linda might think she was invincible with her 20 years here, but I wasn't someone she'd bullied before. I'd been through this, the sprinkler, the cops, and I knew she didn't care about fairness. She wanted control, wanted me to bow, but not this time. I shut the laptop, stood, and glanced out the window again. Linda was still in her yard, chatting up her neighbors like victory was hers. I smiled. She had no idea what was coming. Tomorrow's HOA meeting would be the battlefield, and I was ready to turn her smugness into her own defeat. The game had hit a new stage, and I was holding the upper hand. Night fell over Pinewood Estates, the community house lights blazing in the quiet neighborhood. I walked into the HOA meeting room, clutching a thick file, lawn photos, a USB with videos, Dolores's old records, and printed HOA rules. The room felt cold and tense, with a long table in the center, chairs lined up on either side, and a whiteboard on the wall. Samantha Lee, the HOA president, sat at the head, her face neutral but her eyes weary. Linda Harper sat across, arms crossed tight, a smug smile playing on her lips like she'd already won. I took a deep breath, set my file down, and took a seat. Samantha tapped the table lightly, her steady voice cutting through. We're here to resolve the dispute between Mr. Ethan Miller and Miss Linda Harper, she said, glancing at both of us. Miss Harper filed a complaint about disruptive behavior, and Mr. Miller was asked to explain. Miss Harper, you start. Linda shot up, hands on hips, her tone dramatic like she was addressing a crowd. Thank you, Samantha, she said, turning to me with a piercing glare. I've lived in Pinewood Estates for 20 years, and never had trouble with anyone until he moved in. He refused to clear his lawn for my guests to park their van, an important event for the whole neighborhood. I asked politely, but he sprayed me with sprinklers, humiliating me in front of the police and neighbors. This is blatant sabotage. She sat back down, her smug smile widening, like she'd just landed the killing blow. Samantha looked at me, nodding. Mr. Miller, your turn. I stood, keeping my voice calm but firm. Thank you, Miss Lee. I didn't disrupt or sabotage anything. Linda demanded I clear my lawn, my private property, for a van for her personal birthday party, not a community event. I refused, and she called the police at dawn to pressure me. I turned on the sprinklers to protect my property, and I've got evidence to back it all up. I placed the file on the table, sliding it towards Samantha. I started with the lawn photos, holding each one up for the board to see. This is my lawn, not blocking anyone. This is the wide street a few yards away, plenty of space for her van. And these are Linda's shoe prints when she trespassed to make her unreasonable demand. Linda sneered, but I kept going. I plugged the USB into the room's projector, playing the video of Linda yelling at Greg, "Take the van over there tonight." I don't care what he says. Her shrill voice filled the room, making a few board members frown. This is proof she's harassing me, I said, pointing at the screen. She planned to park her van right up against my lawn without permission, a clear HOA violation. I pulled out a printed copy of the rules, reading aloud. No one may use another resident's private property without written consent. All large events must be pre-approved. I turned to Samantha. I wasn't notified or asked, and I bet Linda didn't report this party to the HOA either. Linda shot up, arms flailing. That's a lie, she yelled, her voice now trembling. I didn't break anything. He's slandering me. But I wasn't done. I pulled out Dolores's old minutes, sliding them towards Samantha. This is from years ago when Linda was ousted as HOA president for embezzling funds and hosting unapproved parties. She has a history of violations, and now she's at it again. The meeting room went dead silent. Samantha picked up the minutes, skimmed them, then fixed Linda with a stern look. Linda stood there, face flushed, hands shaking. That's in the past, she screamed. He has no right to bring that up. But Samantha raised a hand to cut her off. Mrs. Harper, we need to review the evidence, she said, her voice low but firm. Mr. Miller provided photos, video and documents. What do you have to counter this? Linda opened her mouth, but no words came out. She glanced around the room, seeking support from a few board members, but they either looked down or avoided her gaze. Samantha tapped the table again. Based on the evidence, it appears Mrs. Harper violated HOA rules by requesting to use private property without permission and possibly hosting an unapproved event. We'll issue her a fine and an official violation notice. Linda shrieked, her voice breaking. This is unfair. He's the troublemaker. But Samantha shook her head. We've reviewed it, Mrs. Harper. The decision's made. Linda stood there, face red, then stormed out, the door slamming behind her. I sat down, relief flooding my chest. The board looked at me, a few nodding as if acknowledging my patience. Samantha turned to me. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for providing the evidence. We'll wrap up here. I gathered my papers, leaving the meeting room with a faint smile. I'd done it. I'd used Linda's own rules to take her down. As I stepped outside, Dolores stood near the door, winking at me. You did good, kid, she said, patting my shoulder. I nodded, feeling like I'd just walked off a battlefield as the sole survivor. Linda might not give up easily, but tonight, I was the winner. Darkness cloaked Pinewood Estates as I left the community house, street lights flickering over the quiet road. I held my stack of papers, feeling lighter, like I'd shed a huge burden. Linda Harper had stormed out of the HOA meeting in a rage, the door slamming behind her still echoing in my mind. I smirked, grinning to myself. I'd done it. I'd used evidence and rules to topple Linda's arrogance, and it felt amazing. I walked home, the cool night air slipping through my jacket. My lawn came into view under the moonlight, still green and intact, a reminder I'd protected what was mine. I paused, glancing at Linda's house. Dark windows, no sound, a rare silence, after days of noise. Maybe she was in there, fuming and plotting something new, but tonight, I didn't care. Tonight was mine. A soft knock sounded as I settled onto the sofa. I opened the door to Dolores Ortiz, holding a plate of warm cookies. "I heard Linda's screams from here," she said, stepping in with a sly smile. "You did great, Ethan, she deserved it." I laughed, inviting her to sit and grabbing 2 mugs. "Thanks, Dolores," I said, pouring tea from the kettle. "Without your minutes, I don't know if I'd have won." Dolores shrugged, sipping her tea. "You won because you're smart," she said. "Linda always thought she was untouchable, but you taught her a lesson." She winked, then left, leaving me with the cookies and a flood of satisfaction. I sat there, nibbling a cookie, gazing at my lawn through the window. No more shouting, no flashing police lights, just peace, though I knew it might not last. Linda wasn't the type to give up easily. I recalled how she'd stormed out of the meeting, eyes blazing, and I knew she'd be back, maybe with a new scheme to retaliate. But this time, I was ready. I stood, grabbed my phone, and called a security camera company. If Linda wanted to keep playing, I'd record her every move. I wasn't just protecting my lawn, I was guarding my freedom in Pinewood Estates. I returned to the sofa, took a final sip of tea, and smiled. Tonight's victory wasn't about destroying Linda, it was about showing her not everyone bows to her. I'd played smart, using rules and evidence instead of losing my temper, and that made this win even sweeter. Tonight, I'd sleep better than ever, knowing Linda Harper had met her match, and this time, she'd lost. The story vividly reflects tensions common in modern American suburban life, where homeowners associations, HOAs, and neighbor disputes aren't rare. Linda Harper, calling 911 at dawn, just because Ethan didn't clear his lawn for her party van, embodies the Karen, a popular U.S. internet term for entitled, controlling people. Ethan Miller, on the other hand, represents the average American who values property rights and fights back when crossed, like when he turned on the sprinkler to protect his lawn or used video of Linda yelling at Greg as evidence. The HOA meeting, where Ethan presented photos, Dolores's documents, and rules to turn the tables, shows how Americans often rely on laws and logic to settle issues. The specific lesson here is in today's U.S. society, where individual rights and the law reign supreme, you need to protect yourself with preparation and patience. Ethan didn't retaliate emotionally, like when Linda threatened him in the yard. Instead, he gathered evidence, photos of Linda's shoe prints, video of her barking orders, studied HOA rules about unapproved events, and leveraged Dolores's support to win at the meeting. This highlights that in America, where the legal system shapes much of life, keeping records, like Ethan's videos, and knowing your rights as he confirmed with the HOA are effective ways to handle real-life Lindas. Plus, Dolores's role shows the value of neighborly bonds. A friend like her can be key in tough times. Learn from Ethan, stay calm, use your head over your fists, and turn your opponent's weaknesses into your strength in a society that prizes individuality and justice like the US today. If you enjoyed the story of how I took down Linda Harper with a sprinkler and evidence, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next suburban drama. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with more clever victories.